Hi and welcome to the Motor Alchemista channel. With me here today I have the Ducati Multistrada 1200 Enduro from 2016, and I want to show you how you can replace a riveted chain. Put the bike on its center stand or a paddock stand. I make a mark on the output shaft to know what position is correct when putting everything back together after the job is done. Then you release the pinch bolt and pull the linkage off. Pressing my thumb against the output shaft makes it come off easier. Neither the bolt's threads or the splines on the output shaft look very nice, so I go over them with a steel brush. To remove the front sprocket cover, you need to pull the hose aside to access the two screws. As you can see, they also have residue, so you know the deal. Clean it up. Remove the front sprocket cover, and if there's dirt, clean it too. Then, to remove the front sprocket nut, first flatten the lock washer by, for example, placing the edge of a chisel between the folded part and the sprocket nut. Then gently tap with a mallet. When it's somewhat flattened, I find it quicker to work with a drift punch. With the bike in neutral gear and rear wheel locked to prevent it from spinning, release the front sprocket nut.
Unfortunately, I couldn't find any glasses, so a helmet will have to do.
When cutting the chain, let the disc work its way into the material instead of forcing, because it might grab and pull sideways. Finally, remove the chain. Now switch the front sprocket to the new one and refit the washer and the nut. We're not going to fully tighten yet, and the next step is to change the rear sprocket. To get the rear wheel off this Multistrada, you need a 12.36mm socket for the rear spindle nut. Remove it in any washer, then tap the axle with a mallet. Remove the chain adjuster block, and once you can grab the axle from the other side, lifting the rear wheel slightly helps to ease the pressure when pulling the axle all the way out. To remove the rear sprocket, release the rear sprocket nuts. Note that one side of the sprocket has recesses that the nuts fit into, so ensure that the new sprocket mounts correctly. I apply thread locker and tighten in a cross pattern. For this bike with a torque of 44 Newton or ish 33 pound-feet. Then refit the rear wheel, the axle, the chain adjuster block, and washer and spindle nut. Now, we want to loosen the chain so that the new chain can reach all the way around since it's hopefully tighter than your old one. Loosen the chain adjuster lock nut on both sides and turn the adjustment bolt several turns. Push the rear wheel forward to eliminate space between the chain adjuster block and bolt, then tighten the spindle nut by hand. Then you can fit the new chain. And as you can see, the distance is too big and the ends don't meet, so pull the chain to make it reach the other end, and worst case, you need to loosen the chain adjustment even more. Alright, so this is the Rivet Master Link, consisting of one metal plate, a metal plate with pins, and 4 rubber discs that go on each pin, each side of the chain roller. And this is a spacer you can put between the plates so you don't press too tight. Personally, I don't use them because I find they tend to get stuck and are fiddly to remove. Put the metal plate with pins through the chain roller slots and mount the 2 remaining rubber discs. And as for the rivet tool, there are 2 plates, one with the groove that will be on the anvil side and the plate with the 2 holes on the screw side. Place the grooved press plate over the already pressed pin heads on the back side of the chain toward the bike and wiggle it slightly side to side, and you'll feel how it centers itself. The 2 holes on the press plate closest to you should line up with the holes of the chain's outer plate. Once everything is aligned, use a wrench and begin pressing by turning the screw. Stop once the ends of the pins facing you begin to enter the holes in the tool by about 1 or 2 millimeters. At this point, I rotate the wheel to move the work area into a more comfy position and continue pressing there. I press a little, then check the movement of the master link by comparing the feel with the neighboring lengths. Don't press too much at once because it's a nightmare trying to push the outer plate back if it becomes too tight and pinches the O-rings. Once the master link feels like it moves the same way as the surrounding links, it's time to rivet the pin heads to lock the plate in place. To do that, reconfigure the rivet tool. Remove the press plates, then install this anvil on the opposite side of the main screw. Next, take the press pin with a spring around it and insert it into the main screw with the rounded end facing the anvil. Thread the inner screw, but not so far that the press pin sticks out from the tool. As a rough reference, leave the head of the press pin about 3 millimeters from the opening. Now rotate the rear wheel so the master link sits on the rear sprocket. Put the tool over the chain so that the press pin sits directly over one of the chain pins. The anvil will center itself over the pin you're about to flare. Turn the screw, which pushes the press pin forward and mushrooms the end of the chain pin. You'll definitely feel resistance, so apply a fair amount of force. Turn once or twice, then inspect. Repeat until both pin ends look like tiny mushrooms. Now on to the chain adjustment. You'll find your bike's chain slack specification either on the swing arm or in the owner's manual, and you begin by loosening the rear wheel nut again. Then you can use the alignment marks, and if your bike doesn't have any, use a caliper to make sure both sides are adjusted evenly. Here's a quick visual of what happens with the chain when I turn the adjustment bolts. And sorry for the temporary loss of focus, but usually clockwise tightens the chain and counterclockwise loosens it. But sometimes the adjustment direction is reversed, so be aware of that. Rotate the wheel and use the tightest spot as your reference point. And if you happen to tighten it slightly more than recommended, don't stress too much. New chains tend to stretch the most during the first 100 kilometers or 62 miles or so anyway. Once you're happy with the adjustment, make sure there's no gap between the adjuster blocks and bolts before tightening the rear wheel. I wedged something between the rear sprocket, chain, and wheel to lock everything in place and to help keep the alignment steady while tightening. Torque for this Multistrada Enduro is 180 Newton or 130 pound-feet, whereas Multistradas with a single-sided swing arm are whopping 230 Newton or 172 pound-feet. Then tighten the lock nuts on both sides by holding the adjustment bolt still. Torque to 25 Newton or 18 pound-feet. When tightening the front sprocket nut, keep the bike in neutral with the rear wheel locked. You can tie down the rear brake, lean over the bike yourself, place a foot on the rear wheel, or ask a friend to hold the brake. Torque to 186 Newton or 137 pound-feet. Using pliers, bend a fresh section of the lock washer. And clean the cover if you didn't already, and the same goes for the sprocket cover bolts. Reinstall the cover, making sure to not pinch any hoses. Apply thread locker if recommended, and tighten to around 6 Newton or 4.5 pound-feet. Refit the shift linkage onto the output shaft. This is where the mark we made earlier comes in handy. And apply thread locker if recommended, and common torque here is 10 Newton or 7 pound-feet. At last, check that everything moves and feels as it should. Oh, and I forgot to put this hose back in its place. Or almost. That's it, that's all on how to replace riveted chain along with the front and the rear sprocket. Now I hope this video was of help to you, and if so, please like it and also comment what your takeaways are. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!